Welcome to Yours Creatively podcast, the podcast where we discuss stories of creative growth. And today we'll be talking to Courtney Davila. She is a stylist based in LA, and she shared with us a lot of her personal creative growth over the years. How she became a stylist, how she is implementing a way of operating that counters gatekeeping in her creative industry, and how sticking together in community is really important in these times. I really liked speaking to Courtney. She was super, I think, in tune with her own way of viewing creativity as a life force, and I honestly found it quite inspiring speaking to her. So without further ado, I really hope you enjoy listening to her as much as I enjoyed talking to her. Welcome, Courtney, to Yours Creatively. We're going to be chatting to you about your creative endeavours, about all kinds of things. I'd like to start maybe with your outfit, if you don't mind.
Thank you. Well, I'm so excited. Thanks so much for having me. I did let you know that I was thinking about my outfit for a while, and I decided I wanted to wear a button-up under a t-shirt, something kind of different and unusual. It is very, very hot where I live, but I'm indoors and we're making it work. And then I have my usual little rings and some bracelets, which hopefully don't make too much noise today.
You're totally fine, and I think it's a real, commitment to style that you've been wanting to wear different layers in the climate that you live in. Do you want to tell us a little bit about your work, your creative work, and maybe also what clothes mean to you in that?
Absolutely. So I am what you would call a fashion stylist or a wardrobe stylist. And basically what that means is that I am charged with providing wardrobe, everything to make a head to toe look. So we're talking accessories, garments, undergarments, shoes for various projects. So they could be photo shoots, for magazines, for brands, for red carpet appearance, film and television, which I haven't done too much of, but it is a very exciting, very laborious career, and one that is not easy to break into, but it's something I love. And I love that this career is central to clothing because that has been one of my passions since I was young, picking out your outfit for school or going back to school shopping. When I got a little older, I got into upcycling, and I would cut up all my clothes in my room late at night and just try to personalize my style because I was very shy growing up. So expressing myself through my outfits was one of my outlets I first found.
I love that. So you're saying, it was a difficult career to break into.
Yes.
Is it one that you went in straight away, or how has that journey been to this point where you're doing this for your work?
Absolutely. I would say in the US and possibly I can't speak for the rest of the world, but a degree is not needed to go into fashion styling specifically because it is more of a trade, I would say. It's freelance often. And so I decided to go to a 4-year university and get my degree in fashion so I could have that background, which I would never regret. It taught me so much. It was wonderful. But the industry itself, styling, it's very gatekept. It's not something you often learn about in school or even online. And there has been more of a shift to opening it up and kind of removing those barriers. But it's a long-standing trade, and a lot of people who run the industry wish to keep it secret. And I think that's changing, which is exciting.
How do you notice that changing yourself?
Yes. I think part of it is just people are getting swept up in the online course trend, and they do want to share the knowledge they have because otherwise the industry won't continue and we won't have, new fresh talent. But I think also people are realizing that, if this is your passion, if this is what you want to do, it's nice to help each other out and to be the help and the light and even maybe the mentor that you wish you had when you were first getting into the industry. A lot of people get taken advantage of. A lot of people don't get paid. A lot of people, struggle to make connections. So I think just being what you wish you had when you were first emerging and passing on that kindness, I think it's become more important to people, which I'm very grateful for.
It's really good to hear that you're noticing that as well. I think that's some shift that I'm seeing across like different creative industries, where I think before we saw a lot more this, I'm the creative genius, and therefore you kind of like want to gatekeep it because then you keep more for yourself.
Yeah.
Whereas I feel like that's looking bad now. People are shifting their mindset in that and realizing that, you're actually not helping yourself by doing that, because we're all connected to each other. And so when you share things and don't gatekeep, you can actually get a lot back from sharing that with people. Like you'll get back that same kind of energy and karma, and you might get really great ideas from having chats with people or like being vulnerable and open in that way. So I'm really excited to see, like, I really want that to actually push through.
Yes, me too.
I think when we wrote, you mentioned also that this is something that is part of your practice, the element of not gatekeeping and helping people around you. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about that?
Absolutely. I have always had the desire to help people, or had the calling to just be open and generous because I can. And I think also being a person of privilege where I live, being white, having a stable, upbringing, being middle class, I was able to go to college. I was able to take on certain internships and maybe free work that other people cannot. And I think instead of telling people, oh, just follow my path and you'll be successful, I think that's quite naive, because it doesn't take into account people's backgrounds, people's financial situations, or just even their place in the world. And I think opening up these doors, I definitely see it as a role that I would like to take on as much as possible, because it's not about just this industry, it's about changing our world as a whole. And when you can open up doors for people, even if I'm not that far in my career, if I can do anything to help someone along, I think it means so much for us as a collective, like you were saying, and as a community. And, why wouldn't I?
Yeah. I love that. Have you been able to, you said your career hasn't been that long, but how has that already looked in the say, you say short career that you've had thus far, but I'm sure it's longer than you think.
I have been thinking about that. I think this year marks 6 years since my first styling internship, which was during college. And then I graduated 5 years ago during lockdown, which is a funny time to look back on as starting my career, but I did then. And from every moment since that time, I was always thinking, what friend of mine can I, suggest to be hired at my job? I have, a styling gig, like what person can I bring on as an assistant who maybe otherwise didn't have that opportunity? I think the practice of taking people along with you as you go, up the ladder, horizontal networking, if you will, it's not only does it provide me with the help and assistance I need and create the environment that I want to work in, which was with my friends, but I think it also helps us all create a more equal playing ground.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, this is great that I feel also probably in the work that you do, you have to collaborate with other people, right? I'm supposing in a lot of contexts you'll be working with a photographer, or there's other creatives that you go through a project with. Am I right in thinking that? I mean, I'm really not at home in that world, so does collaboration is really central to your work?
Absolutely. I think as a stylist, when you're first starting out, you do these things called test shoots, and it is purely collaborative, like no one's getting paid, but you're basically a photographer, a stylist, a model, and then hair and makeup all come together, and you come up with a mood board and a concept, and that's kind of the first start to developing your portfolio as a stylist, or one of the other niches I mentioned. And you all get together and you get to create. And a lot of people I do these with, because you can continue to do them as long as you want, they mention that they're the most fun projects they usually have that week, even compared to the ones that pay well. It's fun to have creative freedom. It's fun to collaborate with your friends. It's fun to call the shots and get to be in charge for a little bit. And I think collaboration and networking is so integral to this career, because as you all do level up, you remember one another and you can be like, oh, hey, I know a makeup artist. Like, here's the number. Or I have a great photographer for that project. Like, let's bring them on. And I hope to one day look back at these test shoots we did and say, oh my gosh, totally, that was worth, my time, because I got to spend time creating and meet these amazing individuals who are so successful. I hope in the future, when I'm on bigger projects and onto, greater things, I can look back on these test shoots and these collaborations I did with these folks who I knew were also going to be so talented and so successful, and realize that all of those moments spent were so worth it and added up to a successful career. So I'm really looking forward to that chance to be able to look back on what I'm building right now.
Do you already feel like that looking back at the journey you've been on in the last 6 years?
I mean, it's hard to say because I've kind of jumped around in the styling game, as a lot of stylists tend to do. So there are many areas of styling. For those who don't know, there's personal styling, which is when you go into someone's closet and you help them dress for their everyday or their work. There's editorial styling, which gets submitted to magazines and publications. There's e-commerce styling, which is the commercial side, and there's so much more, right? Celebrity styling gets a lot of press, but it is one of the hardest, in my opinion. So I feel like I'm still learning about all the different niches within styling. So yeah, there's a lot of smaller projects I get to look back on and be like, oh, that was, me learning, and I've grown so much since then. But I still feel like each shoot, each project, I am totally learning. Sometimes it feels like everything all over again. And I kind of love that. And it's also kind of challenging because you're like, I just want to feel like I have a sense and a grasp of this industry, but it is constantly evolving and changing and growing as our fashion trends. So it keeps you on your toes.
Is that also because of the projects you take on are kind of growing, or in kind of the demand they have, or they're more challenging in other ways, or why is it just because the fashion industry is changing, or is it also that you look for more challenging projects?
That's a good point. I think I have gotten some more challenging projects as the years go on, and the reaction I get is I get the email and I go, oh my gosh, this is so amazing, and I celebrate and I dance around, and then immediately I'm like, I don't know how to do this. They're gonna find out I'm a fraud, right? The creative imposter syndrome, and then I go and text everyone I know, and ask them questions, and I Google and I watch videos and I learn, and then people remind me in my life, you can do this, you know how to do this, you'll figure it out. And any mistakes you make along the way are usually fixable, and they're all learning experiences. So yes, a lot of projects challenge me to grow and learn new things. I was just on a project where I was on a big production, basically like a film production set for the very first time, and I was so out of my league. I didn't know where to eat. I didn't know where to use the restroom. I didn't know where to stand, where to sit. I was asking so many questions. I probably bothered many people, but they were all very kind. And it ended up being one of the most gratifying projects in my career to date. So getting out of your comfort zone, I would say definitely pays off.
That's amazing. I love that. I mean, you were saying that okay, and then I'm in this, this creative imposter syndrome mode. But you immediately in the same breath said, but then I go and look and ask for people and I look for solutions to that. And I think that's impressive, because honestly, I sometimes don't do that. I'm just like, oh, yeah, I'm just going to sit over there and just not do anything for a bit and procrastinate. And I definitely, I'm guilty of that sometimes. But I think it's always so good when people just talk about that and they're just, no, because ultimately, and especially creative people, I think, deal with that a lot. Have you felt also moments in the last times where you felt like, wow, that was actually a really big creative lesson, or something I had to go through that, wow, I learned so much from that other people that are creative should hear this?
Oh, that's such a good question. Honestly, I feel like each project and each shoot I try to think after that I've wrapped, what's one big takeaway from this? And sometimes it's as simple as I should have brought more jewelry because I didn't have enough options. Like, it's something so niche and so specific to styling. But sometimes I feel like the greatest lesson to learn as a creative, especially when you're coexisting with other people and teams and projects, is to just be seriously as kind and friendly, as helpful as possible. No one wants to be on set for 8 to 12 hours. Sometimes you don't want to even be there for 4. And being kind and being lighthearted and being helpful is the biggest thing you can bring to the shoot besides your talents. And that's what gets people to call you back. That's what gets you referrals and references, is to just show up with as best of an attitude as you can muster and just be present and be the kindest person you can be that day.
So earlier you said something about how when you were much younger, clothes were always a really big part of your self-expression. And what I was wondering is, you know, we've been talking a lot about, like, say, the commercial side of being a stylist and doing this as your work. But I want to see kind of if we can, like, zoom out a little bit into creativity as something that's not just necessarily about making money or making a living, but as something that makes us human, right? And I was wondering about if you could, like, talk me through what role creativity plays outside of your work as a stylist at the moment.
That's such a great question. I truly think creativity is at the basis of everything I do, and I think styling is just one outlet that I get to express it out of. I know not everyone identifies as a creative person, but I think as humans we inherently are, and I think it's just about finding the right method and output for that. But yes, creativity has always been my game. I felt even as a young kid, you know, I wanted to be an artist, and so I started practicing, and I would draw a picture every day. I was probably like, 3 or 4 years old, and it was just something I felt immediately committed to, and I think it's what gets me out of bed most mornings. And I think creativity is just another word for, like, your life force and what drives you forward. It's not just about being good at drawing. It's about creating a life that you desire and doing the things to make that happen. And maybe that's kind of meta and really zoomed out, but that's how I feel about creativity, because I may not always be a stylist, but I will always be a creative, and that's what matters to me most.
Okay, so now we're getting into, I think, a really interesting part of things, because we mentioned also the role of transitions in your career, and I really, really love this, what you say about creativity being life force. Maybe let's talk a little bit about, how have you figured that out? Like, where does this mindset come from? Have you always felt like that creativity is life force, or have you drawn this from somewhere? Or
yes, I think just being younger and thinking, it's my dream career, like what I want to do when I grow older. Like, I knew it had to be creative. And then I went through, all my schooling and university, and I went, okay, I have to get a 9 to 5 if I want to be successful. And then I tried that, and I was like, my creativity is so stifled. I feel like, I feel like my soul is going to rot, is how I felt. I was working in a photo studio in the back. There were no windows, not to be dramatic, but it was just like, I felt like my creativity went to die there. And taking that experience of my first, corporate job and being like, okay, so maybe that's not the path for me. Prioritizing creativity isn't always heralded and encouraged, I think, in an economic or financial standpoint. And I understand that. And I will choose it time and time again because it is what I love. So when I say creativity is life force, I truly mean it's a thing that keeps me going, because without it, what are we doing? Like, if we're not creating for ourselves or for other people, if there's no connection to ourselves and, what we really desire, what's the motivation? What's keeping you going? Not to be stark, but that's how I feel.
Why are we here? Right? And I think that's, I've really felt like that this change in thinking really released a lot of energy in me, because I think it's really commonplace for creative people to have conformed to a 9 to 5, to have, and I think a lot of people are currently in that situation still. They're just going to their corporate jobs, and they won't leave it because they're afraid of, the other side of quitting that.
Yeah.
Myself included, last year I was in a very similar position. I think there's something there in terms of like, why do we come to this planet? Why do we come here? Do we come here to create GMV uplift for an e-commerce company? Or like, some people might, and that's good for them, but I had to ask myself that question, and I realized I don't think I am. I don't think I am. And we really get told that, like, if you want to, make a living out of your creative abilities, that you have to be the best. That you have to be, like, as good as the person in the magazine or the persons that are getting a lot of acclaim and awards. And it's really hard to not compare yourself when you're, like, just starting out in a career that's creative. But I think you're so right in kind of highlighting that when, like, the lens we need to look at it through, or the way that we need to kind of calibrate with that, is purpose. It's who are you and what are you here for? What drives you? What motivates you? Because that's, I mean, to put it like in kind of woo-woo terms, is your light, I think, and you're here to shine it, right? Like, we're not here to dull ourselves, really.
Mm-hmm. No, I think that is such a beautiful sentiment of, yes, a lot of people conflate fame with an artist's success, but when you were speaking, I thought to myself, I don't think success is determined by fame or, who's in the magazine. I think it's determined by your consistency and your willingness to show up every day and do it again, even when you want to quit really, really badly and just go get that corporate job. And you always can. That's always there for us as an option. But I think saying I'm going to continue this journey as long as I possibly can, until I'm given a message by the universe to stop, and just doing that and going forward, I think that's one of the bravest things you can do in this life.
Totally, yeah. And that showing up is connecting to yourself, right? Is figuring out, because that's the other thing, I think, with when we compare our success to other people's successes, it doesn't really make sense because they're a different person. They're here with a different purpose. They're here with a different thing to do, and you're here with a thing to do. So why would you compare the trajectory of these two things? Like, also because we all come from different places, as you said before. Some people will have had a completely different upbringing, and they bring, because of that, something else to the table. I wonder also, you mentioned when you wrote to me also being an advocate for the queer community. Mm-hmm. Do you want to tell me a little bit about the role of creativity in that?
I would love to. I mean, first of all, I just want to say, just gave me some really great advice about not comparing myself to others, because their background is different than mine. I needed to hear that. and their purpose is different. I loved that. Yes, speaking about the queer community, I mean, talk about a community that shows up every day, that doesn't quit, that doesn't hide, and that prioritizes self-expression and courage and bravery and resilience over everything. I myself am part of that community, and it is such a beautiful place to be. It can be a very dark and scary and sad place to be when you're isolated from that community that you need, and especially at a time like this when a lot of our rights and securities and safeties are at stake. It can be so scary, and a lot of people may feel the inclination to want to hide and be less visible, and I felt that myself, but I still push myself, why don't you put the word, lesbian in your bio? Why don't you say you're a lesbian stylist? And instead of seeing it as pigeonholing myself or typecasting myself, I see it as hopefully being a beacon of light to others, that you can be whatever your identity is and pursue your creative dream at the same time. And I think just sometimes even seeing those two identities intersect and cross over can be so inspiring, because there are a lot of queer people pursuing creative dreams and desires and careers, and it's important to show that these two can coexist, and that you can be successful and you can be happy and satisfied with your life, and you can have support and success. And I think if I would have heard that at an earlier age, I would have felt so pumped up to be queer and creative. And so I hope I can do that for at least one person in my sphere.
I hope this light is like traveling through this podcast to someone at some point. Like not just to have the podcast reach, but just to have your intention be fulfilled.
Thank you.
I hope this can be a vehicle for that. If not, I'm sure you'll accomplish it in lots of other ways. I'm a strong believer in that like attracts like, and that I think when we really tune into who we are and allow that to come out and shine into the world, it's like a frequency that you send out, and whoever matches that frequency or whatever matches that frequency will vibe with it, and therefore you'll like attract it. I mean, a great example of that is how we ended up in this podcast.
Yes.
I literally just posted something on Threads that maybe 10 people saw, but all of those people were people that needed to connect to. So it's, you can say, oh, it only reached 10 people, but it reached the 10 people that it needed to reach in that moment. And I think you're also touching upon something that I think is absolutely crucial to the time that we live in. Which is kind of like the question of responsibility right now and how we want to show up in a world that's very divisive, increasingly aggressive, and certainly makes people that in the queer community worry a lot more that our rights are being reversed. In Germany, where I live, we're seeing that in how the Pride March basically is kind of under. They're losing a lot of sponsorship currently. We're seeing also the political climate in Germany kind of moving away from supporting the queer community, and it's just terrifying to think that we're in this stage now. How has it been on your side of the pond? I mean,
yes. I would say it's been very similar this past Pride Month. We did see a lot of corporate sponsorships, pull away from supporting Pride, and there's pros and cons to that, right? Like we don't want corporations just using our community, as a marketing plan for the month of June. But I think what I've noticed in my own life and like you said, in the world at large, is there is this return to a sort of a civil rights movement. There's a return to the gay and queer liberation movement, the trans liberation movement. And even though it's scary and no one wants to be, fighting for the right to be here, I think it's so essential that we all get on board and understand that these movements are essential. They're what, brought us forward in the past, and they're going to do that again. And it sucks we have to do it all over again. But how lucky are we that we are chosen to carry forth that message, even when it's absolutely terrifying, because I would rather follow in the footsteps of our queer ancestors and trailblazers than be stagnant and be silent. So a lot of things are coming to the surface, and I think we just have to continue to march forward, literally and metaphorically, and be visible and be strong to the extent that you can.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really crucial now to stick together. I think it's really beautiful that you mention that there's always a shadow and a light to everything. I guess there's always two sides to everything, and as much as this is absolutely terrifying and not the direction that we both agree we should go into, a shimmer of like kind of a silver lining that I can see there is that I feel like our generation has seen kind of like society move towards a really hyper individualistic capitalist kind of format, and we're seeing the effects of that now. Everything that's happening in the world right now is got a relationship to that. And I think now with it, once we're seeing like all these things that like oh no, this is not on, like this is not on, we do not, it gels people together again. And I hope that we'll continue seeing people organizing like and sticking together and regrouping into solidarity again. I really hope that. But I guess the role that creativity and art and plays in that, I think, is also going to be increasingly important. I don't know if you see that in your community over there as well.
Absolutely. I mean, just speaking of Threads, I feel like even though that comes from a corporation, that social media platform, it truly has brought so much community and collectivism back to us that we didn't previously have. And I think that's where the queer community and other communities that are minorities, like communities of color, where that intersects with art and creativity is that industry, if you can even call it that, the creative world, is so community based. And when we return to that, we return to, I think, alignment and like the way we all want to be living, which is in community with one another. And when we're hyper individualized and we're focused on ourselves, we're not fighting for the good of everyone. And I'm glad to be back to a place where we have so much technology that is able to unite us and bring us together, even though that's not wanted or desired by the powers that be. We're doing it anyway. We're doing it in person, we're doing it online, and it's so truly so special, and I'm really, really grateful to be a part of it. And I hope it continues and magnifies in the next few years to come.
Me too. I was quite pleasantly surprised by Threads in that way. Kind of confused though, because it's owned by Meta.
Yeah, we're kind of waiting for the other shoe to drop, I'm sure.
That is the part that I'm like, okay, it is fantastic that we have this route and we're utilizing it, but then at which stage will something happen? And because at the end of the day, the rule book is in their hands and they can change it at any time, and that's something that I really am afraid of sometimes. But I'm glad that we're making the most of it as it is currently, and it's just one medium. Of course, we have a plurality of different ways that we can stick together and remain connected, which is great. I don't know if you have like festivals on your side, but I increasingly have started feeling myself that festivals are extremely important kind of portals for connection and community. I recently went to Glastonbury and it completely blew my mind, but just the sheer level of the festival and all the just how much diversity of people and representation of culture is at that festival was just mind-blowing.
I went to West Hollywood, Pride Parade this year, and it always makes me cry because when you see hundreds, thousands of people, in the streets, wearing their beautiful outfits and cheering and dancing, you're like, wait, this does exist outside of the internet stratosphere, and this is real. And I belong to some smaller communities locally. I'm in a queer book club, and I'm in a queer kickball league, which has kind of taken over the US right now, it's just a space for us as adults to come together and be playful and exist in community and help each other out and make friends and just have fun. I love that those spaces exist for us as adults because they exist when we're children, and then you grow up and you're suddenly thrown into the world alone and you're like, wait, what am I doing? So I love that you had a wonderful experience, and now I can't wait to pick out a music festival to go to because I want to have that experience too.
This is great. I mean, what you just said about, having that experience at Pride, where you go, this is a space where adults can play and we can connect and we can feel free ultimately, right? And express ourselves. That I think is what I love so much about these kinds of events, whether they be Pride or festivals, is exactly that. I really feel like creativity, we've as a Western society historically really severed a lot of our connection to our subconsciousness, our creativity, and I think the world we've created that is very like, okay, you go to your desk, to your little silo, 9 to 5, come back, you have to do these things, you're in a city and you're severed from your nature almost, or from that part of your psyche. And what I love about festivals is that it offers people that space to completely reconnect to themselves, to completely reconnect to nature. I really hope that one day, like really kind of projecting into the future, we'll be able to create life for people to work and to exist, where that can just be part of how we operate. We don't have to just do it one time in a year in the summer, but we do it kind of more meaningfully throughout our lives. Anyway, I'd like to live like that, but yeah, that's very maybe idealistic. Yeah.
Me too. That's kind of life I always dream about.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit about your kind of dreams, hopes for the future.
Yeah, I think just listening to what you're saying and thinking of this future that is, yes, idealist, but, we can absolutely move towards something more collectivist, and we already are. We see it happening, I think, each and every day, this coming together, not just because it's necessary for us to exist and advocate for ourselves, but because we actually want to do it, and we want to dance and be around people and connect with people of different backgrounds. And I do hope for a lot of that. And I think in tangent with that, there's going to be so many more freelancers and so many more creative entrepreneurs who come out of this because they realize they don't maybe want to be a cog in the machine. They don't want to give up their life for someone else's dream, which is absolutely something you can do because we have free will. But I think more of us want something a little bit deeper out of our lives and our existences, and to look back on our lives and be like, wow, I did a lot, but it was for me. And that's a lot of what I've been feeling lately. I've been like hustling and working so hard, and I want to cry and give up, but I'm like, I'm doing this for me. I'm not doing this for, the man or for some big company. Like, this is for my dream to come true. And I think the more we do it at our level and, within our circles, the more it can have an effect and impact on everyone. And that's my hope, is that we can all just vibe and have a good time. Is that too much to ask for?
I don't think so. No. And I think it's really inspiring listening to what you're saying about that, you are doing this for yourself. You're working for yourself, right? But that doesn't mean it's easy. And it doesn't mean you're not faced with challenges. I did want to ask on the back of that, how do you remain grounded within that in your work? But then I guess also, because we've been talking about all these intense things that are happening in the world, how do you remain grounded in the face of that as well?
Absolutely. I was actually listening to another episode you had with the guest, and she was mentioning therapy a lot, and I was like, you know what, that is a really important part of my life as well. Having a professional to talk to when really wild things are happening is so essential, because getting that validation makes us feel, I think, less insane, for lack of a better term. I also do practice a lot of mindfulness, and what does that look like? It's going on walks, reconnecting with nature, being with friends. I do a lot of journaling, which is important for, I think, a lot of creatives to take what's stuck up here in my mind and get it down on a piece of paper. It could even be scribbling and doodling. I think sometimes just 5-10 minutes of that really brings us out of our heads. I've gotten a lot back more into reading books for pleasure and for fun. I think that is so helpful because I can kind of live in anyone else's fantasy world for a little bit. And yes, I think also spirituality and how that's evolved is so helpful for me personally, to just remember that I'm part of something bigger and that things will probably be okay. And as long as I can make a little step each day to affirm myself and ground myself and nourish myself, I'm going to have a better week than if I didn't do those things.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. I hope I took a note of all these things, and I'm gonna hang them up somewhere so that I could just be like, oh yeah, I can do that now. It's funny, I've always doodled loads, but I've never cherished it much, because I always thought, oh, it's not a proper drawing, it's not like an actual illustration or something I would put in an exhibition, or put in my portfolio or something like that. And as soon as you were saying that, I was like, that is the value of that's the value of doodling. How did I not see that? Well, the reason I was doodling was because it just wanted to come out of me. Why did it need to have any more It didn't need any more than that.
Importance. Yeah.
Thank you for that. That's excellent.
I'm glad you took something from that. That's amazing.
Courtney, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Ninka, for having me. This has been, again, like you said, an absolute pleasure. If anyone wants to see what styling looks like in my day-to-day, you can follow me on Instagram at courtstylist. And if you want to check out my portfolio and how I've grown, hopefully over the years, that's www.courtneydavila.com. And I would just urge anyone who's pursuing a creative dream or a creative interest right now to literally just keep going until you can't anymore, until you run into a wall. And then you just have to evolve and turn around and come up with a new plan. And that's all we're doing. No one has it figured out. No one has the blueprint. We're all just doing our best, and that's enough.
Thank you for that. I am literally going to record that, or I have it recorded, but I'm going to be remembering that. Thanks. Yeah, thanks so much for your time today, and wishing you all the best in your creative endeavours.
Thank you. Same to you.